Here's another part of the Bible that is rarely taught accurately because it deals with the supernatural world and says some things we're uncomfortable with. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years." People read Genesis 6:3 like it's just God saying, "I'm tired of humans being sinful." But that verse is one of the most misunderstood warnings in the entire Bible. And it only makes perfect sense once you understand what is going on in Genesis 6, the actual Hebrew. Lo yadon ruchi ba'adam le'olam. Reads more like this: "My spirit will not continue in man forever." That word for continue is really important. Most people here strive with man, but in Hebrew also means, my spirit will not remain in, abide in, or dwell with mankind indefinitely. And here's the part your Sunday school teacher skipped. This verse isn't floating around in the clouds all by itself. It sits directly on top of one of the darkest chapters in human history. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 3 is right before the sons of God descend, take human women as wives, create hybrid offspring, and produce the Nephilim, the giants of old, filling the whole earth with violence. This is a continuation of the war God announced in Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between your seed and her seed. Whose seed? Satan's seed. Genesis 6 is the enemy's counterstrike, not just moral corruption, but biological corruption. A rival seed, a counterfeit humanity, a bloodline God himself did not create. That's why ancient Jewish writings, Enoch, Jubilees, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all say the same thing. These beings looked like men, but they weren't men. Their souls weren't from God. And when they died, which they would do in the flood, they became the evil spirits that roam the earth today. We call them demons. So now go back to Genesis 6:3. My spirit will not remain in man forever. What if God isn't just talking about sinful humans? What if he's drawing a line in the sand, a point where his spirit, his breath, his life force, will no longer dwell in all that looks human? Because some of it isn't human anymore? The Hebrew allows it, the context demands it, and the New Testament confirms it. So when you read this in context and add in all those other scriptures that are referring to this historic event in Genesis 6, you can't deny the truth anymore. Peter says the angels who sinned were put into chains of gloomy darkness. Jude says they left their proper domain and abandoned their own habitation. Oiketerion means dwelling place home of a specific nature, a body fitted for existence, a habitation appropriate to one's species, or a vessel capable of housing a spirit. This is the same word used in 2 Corinthians 5:2. Longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, oiketerion. Paul uses the word to describe the resurrection body, the heavenly form believers will have. It's the same word, folks. It describes a transformation from mere human flesh to glorified body. So Jude says, the angels left their God-given heavenly bodies. They abandoned the form assigned to them by God, and they took on a different form. So those angels taking on a different form is the most natural reading of the text. The meaning says they left their proper realm. They abandoned their heavenly nature. They cast off their original spiritual body, and they took on a different form that allowed them to produce offspring. This checks all the boxes. Genesis 6, the book of Enoch, Jubilees, Dead Sea Scrolls, 2 Peter 2:4, Jude 1:6-7. Many of the early Christian writings like Justin Martyr, Athenagoras, and Tertullian, and of course almost all of the ancient Jewish interpretations. Enoch explicitly says the watchers transformed themselves and defiled themselves with the daughters of men, and Jude's language matches that perfectly. Jesus says in Matthew 24, that the last days will look just like the days of Noah. Not just morally corrupt, but genetically corrupt. A war over the seed, a war over the image of God. So when God says, "My spirit will not always strive with man," it's not just be a warning of judgment, but a declaration that his spirit does not, cannot, and will not abide in flesh that he did not create. So here are the main points made in Scripture that you need to know. Flesh became animated by something else at some point, something fallen, something counterfeit. The Nephilim were not God's children. They were not filled with his spirit or given a soul. They were animated flesh, but not his flesh. They were alive, but not living. Animated, but not in his image. Genesis 6 isn't a myth or talking about the good boys, the sons of Seth, taking the bad girls, the daughters of Cain, and creating rotten children, who just happened to become giants and men of renown. The picture we get in Genesis 6 is that of a battlefield. A clash of seeds, a line God draws in the sand between his creation and the corrupted flesh that tried to replace it. So when God says, "My spirit will not remain in that," not forever. The question is, what does that mean for our generation? The generation that Jesus said would look exactly like the days of Noah. Nobody knows exactly, but if you look around, you can definitely see the fingerprints of evil corrupting so much of the world we live in today. We could almost use the same word to describe it: continuously.